Brought to you by Williams. We make clean energy happen.
I'm Yasmin Gagne.
I'm David Salazar.
And this is Most Innovative Companies. On today's episode, Fast Company staff editor Kristin Toussaint and Fast Company contributor Clint Rainey.
Here's something everybody can eat, but it's probably not what either of us would grab first.
Harry McCracken, Fast Company's global technology editor, and contributor Jared Newman.
As we looked at what happened in 1995, we realized it was a pretty interesting year.
And as always, keeping tabs.
If Starbucks really wants to win, they need to get Sydney Sweeney to do an ad talking about the importance of single-sourced genetic origin of their beans.
But first, here's the download, the news you need to know this week in the world of business and innovation.
I hope you love tariffs and jobs. Last week, the Bureau of Labor Statistics made heavy revisions to its May and June job numbers and presented weaker than expected July numbers. Only 73,000 jobs were added in July, and 19,000 were added in May, while 14,000 were added in June. For May and June, that's about 291,000 fewer jobs than were previously reported. In response, President Trump fired the Bureau's commissioner, Erica McIntarfer, calling the numbers, quote, rigged. Trump then announced Sunday that he would pick somebody new to head the Bureau sometime this week. On the tariff front, the threats keep coming. On Tuesday, President Trump told CNBC that tariffs on pharmaceuticals could reach as high as 250%. The motive, he says, is to encourage drug manufacturing in the U.S., and put pressure on the industry to lower the price of drugs. In the same CNBC appearance, Trump also soft-launched tariffs on chips and semiconductors, the details of which will likely be announced next week. I like that we're soft-launching international trade policy like they're your summer situationship. The White House also announced Wednesday that they would levy an extra 25% tariff on India due to the country importing Russian oil, which raises the total tariffs on India to 50%. And, meanwhile, imports to the U.S. fell, with the numbers for June showing a 4% decline from May numbers.
I can't believe it.
All those things are totally unconnected to each other, by the way.
Next up, your favorite company, Cloudflare, called out the bad behavior of AI-powered search engine Perplexity this week. The company claims that Perplexity is spoofing its identity to crawl and scrape website content used to train its AI, overriding website requests that block AI bots from crawling their content. This is a bold move by Perplexity, which is already facing several lawsuits and threats of suits brought by Dow Jones and the BBC for engaging in the same content scraping behavior. They just can't stop.
Yeah, he's just letting it rip, isn't he?
Yeah. Well.
What can you do?
Yeah.
On Tuesday, the Walt Disney Company and the National Football League announced that the NFL will be taking a 10% equity stake in ESPN, which is owned by Disney. ESPN, in turn, will be acquiring the NFL Network and some rights to the Red Zone channel. The new streaming service, which launches August 21st, will cost $30 and include all ESPN programming. That means that for the first time, you don't need a cable or satellite subscription to view ESPN's content. ESPN also reached a $1.6 billion deal with World Wrestling Entertainment, or WWE, for exclusive rights to its big events, including WrestleMania. Your fave.
Yeah, go read my feature on WWE from earlier this year? Last year.
Last
a while ago. Time is a flat circle. Some hilarious news. After stepping down as CEO of Elon Musk's ex, Linda Yaccarino's next move was unclear until Tuesday, when it was announced that Yaccarino would be the new CEO of eMed, a telehealth company that dispenses Ozempic and Wegovy. This will be Yaccarino's first foray into the medical space after having a background in media, advertising, and marketing.
Pretty interesting to go from being the CEO of X to the CEO of, like, a third-string Wegovy mill.
They still make money hand over fist, you know?
Oh, yeah, and probably way less stressful than her last job.
Yeah, exactly.
Speaking of her last job...
Can you imagine the job interview for this new one being like, what's a challenge that you face in the workplace and how did you solve it?
How long do you have? Speaking of Linda's old boss, as part of a good faith deal to keep Elon Musk at the helm, Tesla agreed to give the CEO roughly $29 billion worth of shares. Tesla currently finds itself at a pivot point, turning its focus toward AI and robotics amid lagging auto sales, and it sees the move as crucial to maintaining stability at the company. The shares given to Musk will increase his voting power, but will only vest if he stays on as CEO through 2027. Musk was also granted these shares as a way to honor his more than $50 billion compensation package, which was struck down last year by a Delaware court. All right, get to those betting sites. Do you think he'll make it to 2027?
Oh my God. Next up, the Hulu app is going to be phased out because Disney is fully integrating the service into Disney Plus. Who's to say what that means? But basically, Hulu's going to be phased out as a standalone app. Buying a standalone Hulu or Disney Plus subscription will still be available as options for consumers. Deeply confusing situation. We don't need to get into it right now.
Do we mean until they are fully integrated?
Dog, I don't know. This was just announced.
All right. Okay. You know what? They'll figure it out. As long as I can keep watching my little Star Wars shows, I will be happy.
And I can keep watching Love Island UK.
Oh, you know what? I'm actually here for the King of the Hill reboot. Never mind. Figma has had a wild week since going public last Thursday. Before Josh went out, he and Yaz called up Fast Company contributor Lily Smith to try and understand what happened.
Lily, oh my God, thanks for coming to the office.
Hi, Yaz. Thanks for having me. Where are you, by the way?
I actually live in Boston now.
Okay, so why am I here in Manhattan?
Well, I'm here. So one of us is here. And we really needed you for this segment.
Okay, that's fair. What are we talking about, guys?
So, what's Figma?
So, we know what Figma is, obviously, but, pretend that we don't know what Figma is and just explain it to us.
Okay, so if we're pretending, then I'll explain it. It's basically like a design and prototyping tool for designers that allows them to make websites and apps. It also allows them to collaborate in real time. It's what helped Figma get big and, lets them work at the same time. It's also worth noting that while this started as a platform for professional designers, they're now expanding their product offerings to try to capture more people on teams, and that's going to be big in terms of growth for them. So that's kind of Figma in a little soundbite.
Word, I knew that, and their strategy for growth is so interesting to me. But thank you so much for that primer.
You are so welcome,
Lily.
And also, another thing that we totally know how it works, IPOs. So Figma IPO'd last week. What was the deal with that?
Yeah, so Figma went public, its initial public offering, IPO, last Thursday. I was actually at the New York Stock Exchange to cover it. I met with their CPO, Yuki Yamashita, and it was a big day for them. So their first day of trading on the New York Stock Exchange, the stock more than tripled in value. Since then, it's popped. On Monday, it dropped to $88.60 at close, down from $122 on Friday. But I think I just checked this morning, it was around 76. So it's come down a little bit, but still pretty high compared to its start. Its valuation is also really big. Currently, it's at $56 billion. And its CEO, Dylan Field, owns more than $5 billion in company stock, and he is now the latest tech billionaire.
Adobe wanted to acquire Figma. Adobe and Figma are different products?
Yes.
Between Adobe, Figma, and Canva, I cannot tell the difference.
Everything you said is true, and I think that's what makes it so confusing. So Figma does, it's really focused on web design and app design. Adobe is more like, I'm trying to think of what a good comparison would be. So InDesign, Photoshop, those kinds of platforms where you're getting really into high fidelity editing, that's what Adobe does. Figma is more like vectors. It's more like kind of like mapping what a layout of a design will look like. It would have been lucrative for Adobe because they would have really owned the entire workflow from soup to nuts. But now Figma decided it's going to be doing that itself, more or less.
This was so great. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Lily.
Sure. Is that all you guys needed from me?
Yeah, you can just you can go back to Brooklyn now.
Oh, okay, great. I'm glad that I, schlepped over to another borough and put those $6 to good use.
And we thank you for that.
On that note, I will catch you guys later.
And that's the news you need to know today.
Now, let's talk about something totally unrelated to design software, fake meat.
In the U.S., protein is a $114 billion industry. While about 90% of consumers are eating animal-based proteins, over 40% are relying on plant-based diets for theirs. 16-year-old company Beyond Meat, which recently rebranded to just Beyond, has been trying to get more people to adopt plant-based diets by substituting animal-based protein for its own plant-based products. The company has not had an easy ride. At its peak after going public in 2019, Beyond Meat's market cap reached $14.1 billion. Now the company has a market cap or net worth of $225.59 million. The enterprise value is $1.35 billion. Anyway, that's a lot lower than $14 billion. That's what you need to know. To learn more about the state of the company and about the tech meat industry, we spoke with Fast Company contributor Clint Rainey, who recently detailed Beyond Meat's rebrand as Beyond, and staff editor Kristin Toussaint. We talked to them about the alt meat industry, Beyond's growing pains, and the company's shifting strategy to reach its ever-changing target audience. So, before we jump into the business of Beyond, what is your take on meat versus kind of plant-based meat? Kristin, we'll start with you. I know you are a vegan.
I am, and I've been vegetarian in total for 19 years. So it's been a long time since I've eaten meat. When I go to these tasting events for Beyond, I always feel like I'm not really their target audience, because when they are really trying to put out a product that mimics meat, I've sort of lost that comparison. And I don't really gravitate towards a lot of alt meat alternatives. I eat like a lot of beans and tofu and those sort of foods. I like them at certain times, like they definitely have their place, but I wonder sometimes if I'm really their target audience, because I don't have a reference point anymore for sort of what real meat is supposed to even taste like.
I was like fully a vegetarian for a couple of years. Now I eat some chicken and fish, especially because I'm pregnant and just not getting enough protein ever. But I haven't had red meat in, about 19 years or whatever, like same amount as you. And I had an Impossible Burger with a friend, and it made me it felt so wrong.
Yes. When they first came out, they really freaked me out, and I would make my husband try, like I would order a Beyond or Impossible Burger out, and I'd be like, you need to try this and make sure that it's not real meat.
Yeah.
And it was kind of freaky in that sense, where it was like almost uncomfortable to eat it, because it was just so drastically different from a veggie burger that it was like, it was a little bit uncomfortable and a little bit freaky.
It's the blood. Or the beet juice that makes it.
I think they call it heme. I think
heme, yes.
That's a very good band.
Clint, what about you?
Yeah, my take is counter to that, simply because I do eat animal products and plant-based alternatives both, and have struggled with the alt meats for the majority of their existence, because I've always felt like it's better for me to eat fewer hamburgers that taste 100% like a burger than eat a bunch of very, very close facsimiles if they're only 90-95% of the way there. And to be honest, I don't know, for people like me who are, to use Brian Cateman's flexitarian, term, like people who are in that middle category of wanting to eat fewer animal products but not necessarily having any qualms about continuing to consume them sometimes. I just don't know that the fact that it is still clearly not the real thing, if that's good enough to fully convert people like me who do still eat meat. And I think that's why we're seeing Beyond try to expand its horizons into a space where it can let the vegetables stand on their own instead of having to mimic meat.
So we're going to get to this in a second, but I feel like both of you actually touched on a central point, which is, who is this company for if not a meat eater and a vegan?
I think that's what the challenge is, and I think that's sort of what they're still trying to figure out. I will say one use case where I've really found these plant-based meat products to work is when I have dinner with meat eaters, like with my husband's family or something. Then it's like, here's something everybody can eat, but it's probably not what either of us would grab first, if that makes sense. Like
The perfect basis for a scalable business.
Yeah.
But I think that really is their challenge of who to find when they are still centering meat so much.
Yeah.
And people who don't eat meat have really gravitated a lot more towards sort of beans and tofu and doing more creative things with those products directly.
Yeah.
And Beyond and Impossible are sort of this like middle party where they're doing the transformation of the ingredients for you, but it takes out some of that creativity for people too, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a pretty avid cook in my day-to-day life.
Oh, really, Josh?
Yaz has been making fun of my Instagram content recently. Also, funny story, I was reached out to by a casting director for Next Level Chef.
Really?
I can't do it. But
And he was
I
auditioning so hard on Instagram.
I was not auditioning. I like to post food content. So Yaz has been every time I post something I cook on Instagram, Yaz just clowns on me in the DMs. But anyways, I like to cook and I'm damn good at it. And it's
It
never
all looks
something.
good. It all looks good. I should give Josh some credit here. It all actually looks like good food. I just like making fun of him.
But I think a lot of people that I know that are either amateur chefs or from back in the restaurant day, like working with Beyond Meat or some of these products is not like a go-to if they want to do a vegetarian stuff or like if they have to fit that, because there's so much, again, to the creativity factor. If I have, say, a group of mixed, like friends coming over that are like mixed eaters, some vegetarian, some vegan, I would just try to cook something good that's vegan.
Yeah,
that
something with
everyone would
beans or
enjoy.
something.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, because you can get there. So I think it's like, so where's the target market? It's people that are not willing
Not
to
creative.
cook something, not creative, and are just like, well, it's good enough for everyone, and we just need to get through this dinner with my in-laws so everyone can eat something.
So I think we're going to come back to this in a second. We sort of got ahead of our skis, but I want to talk about Beyond as a company. And I'll preface this question by saying I think the distinctions I'm about to draw are kind of fake, but is it a food company? Is it a tech company? You know, seed money came from tech companies. What do we think?
The first thing I was going to say really quickly was like to Josh's point a second ago, like who, you know, like if you want to eat these things, like, you know, is it for like the lazy consumer who just doesn't want to have any sort of sense of creativity in what they eat? And like, unfortunately, that's most of America, right? Like that's most people day in and day out. And I think that that's also true about this question of like, you know, is Beyond a tech company. I go, what is a tech company in the 2020s, right? Like it's just a company that comes along, fixes some aspect of an industry that the founders have decided is like annoying or undesirable. It's like selling you one of everything if you're Amazon. I don't know, cheap, good-looking glasses if you're Warby Parker. Like, I don't know, it goes on and on, right? But I think that the problem for Beyond is that cool sort of disruption became the focus. Whether that's Beyond's fault or consumers' fault for getting caught up in the hype that was around it is like up for debate, I suppose.
I guess the one distinction I'll say, you know, because you're right, like so many tech companies were just kind of quote unquote disrupting or changing distribution patterns, is they did have to actually do some engineering, right? To mimic animal meat.
Yeah, they did a lot of that science of making the protein in this way. And I remember I was talking to Beyond CEO Ethan Brown a year ago where he was saying, you know, people had sort of asked them, why don't you just make protein from plants that doesn't mimic, you know, beef, pork, or poultry? Why don't you
Like a
just get it
veggie
sort of
burger.
directly from the plants? You know, like a veggie burger, things that have existed. But he was really focused on the scientific aspect of building the structure of meat out of plants. And so they did do a lot of that tech work of this sort of engineering, the composition and the pea protein and things like that. There's a writer named Alicia Kennedy who calls Beyond and Impossible tech meat, which I think is a great term that does get at this sort of techno-utopian solution, right? Which is that they want to plug in this answer for eating as this one thing that they can create.
Is it good for you?
I think that's a really tricky and subjective question, depending on sort of what you consider good. Beyond has really focused a lot in the past few years on their health story. They've worked with the American Heart Association. They've used Beyond 4 was like avocado oil in their burgers, and they had all these this really big focus on the health of their products. But I think there's the whole ultra-processed debate, which was definitely an attack on Beyond as well, coming from the other side.
So what is the vision for the kind of new line of products coming out, Clint?
That's intended to address head on the argument that these products are ultra-processed. If you talk to Beyond, if you talk to Ethan, he's going to argue that the ultra-processed attack is one waged by the meat industry, and he's very much right about that, but there is also, it's true that the way that product is made lends itself to that sort of attack. And so I think what they've decided is we'll just have it both ways. We'll continue to make these, we'll make the Beyond Burger, we'll make these, they have this like steak now that, it tries to mimic an actual full slab of meat. We'll keep making that stuff, but we'll open. He kept saying like, open our aperture wider. Like we'll make these new products that, in the case of this one, that is the first in this line of more products that attempt to move away from being necessarily like the center of the plate. This thing's called Beyond Ground. It has 4 ingredients. It's basically just protein from fava beans, protein from potatoes, some fiber, and water. And so the crowd that's clean ingredient loving, anti-seed oil, all of that stuff really has no way that they can criticize this product. They may not like the way it tastes. They may have other objections.
I was going to say, yeah, doesn't sound like the most appetizing.
But what they would say is that, like, well, then what is ground beef is just the the flesh of an animal, right? Like, it's all about what are you putting with that in order to draw out the flavors. And what I tried tasted great. I already explained. I was honest at the start by saying that these 1.0 version of these products didn't necessarily always excite me. I was happy to eat them when wanted, but
when you visited your in-laws.
But this new one is being marketed as a universal protein source that can go in for ground beef or pork, or I don't really see a way that it could be used in place of chicken so much yet, but that's I'm sure we'll continue to come out with more items that in their mind are just a new, like a brand new kind of protein, and in the sense that, like, well, sure, you can make a burger from salmon, you can make a burger from chicken, you can make it from whatever. Well, now you can also make it from Beyond Ground, which is like a fava bean centric plant protein that has an insane amount of protein. So, like, if you're into that, then then you get it.
I think you just gave us like a pretty convincing, or like I feel you're a good salesman, Clint.
They should hire me.
But how do they? Yeah, you'll probably make like twice your salary. But how does the company get that message out? Like, how is it going to be able to position itself in the market?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that one thing that I sort of personally came away trying to get my head around and maybe not doing a great job of is what the vision is here, because Ethan is thinking so far beyond to use this term that they have very intentionally made be broad, right? Like, that's the whole idea of dropping meat, is that it's more than meat. We're not just a fake meat company. We now do vegetable proteins that run the gamut of every kind of food product available, potentially in the grocery store. And I think that how you remarket yourself in a way that captures that is tricky. I don't know the answer to that. And right now, they are just making a new, for all of the talk about moving outside of the center of the plate, this is still a center of the plate protein item. It can be used in other ways. They let me talk to some, they've been testing this stuff out with like food creators. And sorry, Josh, I guess they didn't reach out to you.
No, I reached out to me.
But they,
listen, it's a conflict of interest, but still, no one reached out to me.
But they gave it to some, chefs and food creators, and I talked to one, and he was saying that, he had used it in an enchilada dish, a casserole dish, some other like kind of obvious things. But he was talking about like, oh, it could probably be made dry, like dehydrated and made into some sort of a jerky. It could probably be, like all the idea, I think, is that they're trying to get people to be more creative about the use and eventually start to think about it as a side or as I don't know. But sorry, to get back to your question, Yaz, I think that the idea ultimately is one day and soon, I think, a day soon, to branch into items that are basically just protein bar or that type of thing that's extremely popular right now. And in the case of Beyond, they would be competing against a category that, for all of this griping about, oh, your stuff is ultra processed, like, I don't know, look at a David bar. Like, it's like 25 ingredients and you don't know what any of them are.
So I want to talk a little bit about the sort of spear campaign against the alt meat industry as a whole. Tell me, you mentioned it earlier, but what does that look like?
That's been going on for so long now at this point. It's weird that we still talk about it.
Well, Ethan can't stop bringing it up in interviews.
Yeah, well, it's...
You were very mean to him at South by Southwest. I do just have to say.
No,
the valuation went down after Yaz was mean to Ethan Brown on stage at South by.
No. I want to say this.
He didn't answer the question.
I don't. Yeah,
no,
that was it. He just kept trying to sell Beyond Meat 4 when I was asking him about like layoffs.
Yeah.
And I don't dislike Ethan Brown at all. Like, I don't dislike the company. This was not personal animus. I just wanted to
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, from a technological perspective, it's a very impressive product, but I feel kind of like I do about Beyond Meat the way I do about Colossal, where it's like, this is really impressive, but like what for?
Well, at least Beyond has products that exist.
That's true.
I don't think
that may have been an unfair comparison. But those woolly mice, so cute.
Yeah,
But,
it's true.
Yeah. There really was this attack on Beyond, though. It's from the meat industry and from this sort of really right-wing adjacent, like clean eating faction. There was a meme going around that was sort of comparing the long ingredient list of a Beyond Burger, and then on the other side it was like, cow burger, one ingredient beef, which is not really an accurate. You could break anything down to its chemical compositions and create like a long, scary ingredient list. And also saying one ingredient beef ignores, the hormones that are pumped into these cows and all the other things that go into that. But that was part of the campaign, was that like, this is this sort of genetically engineered other thing. And like, why not just eat something with one ingredient beef? That was really coming from like the meat industry and that sort of audience.
Well, and this campaign the creators of it were masters of this type of stuff. They had a background and, they had helped Big Tobacco try to resuscitate its image after the lawsuits and the scandals that came out of the 80s and 90s. And so, they knew what they were doing. And it's not that some of this stuff doesn't have an amount of truth to it. Like, sure, like these methyl cellulose is a thing that was still is going into some of these products, and it sounds bad, and it's not something that you would find in a normal veggie burger. It's used for a very intentional purpose. But where it gets disingenuous is where you take that tiniest shred of truth and use that to exploit consumers' ignorance of ingredients, right? Just because they have like a lot of syllables or whatever. You can call vitamin C ascorbic acid if you want. Probably find a person who ingested too much and burned a hole in their stomach, but that doesn't mean vitamin C is bad.
So let's move on to sort of Beyond Meats, or now it's Beyond, the company's latest announcement. Clint, why is it such a big deal?
Well, they dropped the bed in the bath.
Beyond sounds like a sort of Hillsong adjacent.
It does. Beyond, I just want to, Beyond Meat has changed its name now to Max for some reason. David Zaslav, new CEO of Beyond Meat.
How many consultants did they hire to say, drop the meat? Anyway, sorry, Clint. Tell us.
What I will say is that in the case of moving from being this like meat mimicking or meat facsimile company to one that sees itself as standing, like its ingredients can stand on their own, I think that has been a decade or 2 decades or something, probably, of Ethan just realizing, like, watching this thing evolve, that he, like, I think he's extremely earnest, and I appreciate that about him, is how much he doesn't seem like, he's not the kind of person who has created something that's popular, but that you just feel like is a swindler a little bit, and you're like, yeah, you're trying to sell me a thing that I don't know that if I want it, but like, you're not going to give up until I say yes. He's more, he's definitely thought this through. You can tell that he's sat around, like probably late in bed at night being like, how can I get more people to eat this kind of protein instead of animal protein? And the decision that he's made is that they're competing for the wrong amounts of it, or the wrong portions of it. And so move to other parts of the grocery store, take the technology that they were kind of first in developing, and use those smart people they already have working there to do things that are kind of easier in a way, simpler ingredients, fewer ingredients. To the price parity point, one of the things that they feel is likely here is like, that's been this holy grail. I don't know what, it's probably 2 years ago, Peter McGinnis was telling me that like Impossible is nearly on the, we're on the precipice of price parity with the burger. Yeah, it's not yet, at least, and so like they've been after this for a long time. But like, what's an easier way to make something compete on price with the heavily subsidized slab of, or like chunk of ground beef? It's if you use fewer ingredients and they just kind of, you don't have to do a whole lot to them. And so I think they see something like Beyond Ground as being the with some help, with some more work, maybe even with some government subsidies, that they could eventually also get to the point where it's competing with meat in terms of price.
So the company recently released Beyond Sun Sausage, which, I'm sorry, such an upsetting name for reasons I don't really know how to describe. Is that when the pivot started? They basically didn't present it as meat.
Yeah, so the Sun Sausage came out last summer, like a year ago, and I think that was the first hints at Beyond moving away from this completely like mimicking beef, pork, poultry sort of mindset, because they really weren't positioning these sausages as a meat replacement. They were advertising their whole ingredients. It was like lentils, brown rice, red bell peppers, pineapple,
It's
things.
Just basically a veggie sausage. Yeah.
Basically a veggie sausage. And I remember talking to them about this and brought up the fact that, plant-based sausages like this have existed for a long time. Clint brought up Tofurkey. Field Roast has also been around. These companies have existed since the 1990s. If you want to go even further back, I mean, the idea of like a seitan-based sausage or meat alternative has existed since ancient China. Like literally, these things exist. Beyond was really positioning the Sun Sausage as something a little bit more broadly appealing. Wheat and soy tend to be top allergens, and so those alternatives that include those things can exclude some people. And so they were still doing this idea of, can we reach the masses with this product but not have it exactly mimic meat? And I was looking back at that story and I had totally forgot about this, but I mentioned in it that, this idea of using real vegetables and talking about these whole plant products was actually a part of the Whole Foods trend forecast last year. The Whole Foods put out this 2024 food trend report that was like, more companies are going to put the plant back in plant-based with products, featuring mushrooms, legumes, like these recognizable plant ingredients again. So that was really, I think, the beginning of this trend that Beyond definitely jumped on.
So I want to talk a little bit about its sourcing for new products, because apparently Ethan Brown is obsessed with fava beans. He's basically, is he just really into the Roman Empire and fava beans were popular then?
Well, yeah, so he talked about the Roman Empire a lot, and I think that it ties into this like a attempt to, I have to use the word romanticize here, which, I guess that's a fitting word choice for the Roman Empire. But, there's a romanticization in the need for these products to be impressive is key to selling them. And I think that when you just are like, this thing is a legume and a potato protein and water and fiber, somebody who's not necessarily convinced to eat the other kinds of plant-based products that already look like meat might be like, well, I don't know, you haven't really sold me on this one either. But one of the things that he's gotten interested in is how the gladiators were basically fed a vegetarian diet, and it's one that was very legume forward. In fact, fava beans were like a key component of that. And his argument is basically like these were like the most elite athletes of, the Roman era, and they were eating fava beans. So if it worked for them, it can work for us. And then, there is something you can glamorize it a little bit by playing up the Roman gladiator ties.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because it's also like, you could be like, oh, they used to use like XYZ to cure a disease. And it's like, well, now we have vaccines. Like, I don't know.
You don't want to go too far down that road. Yeah.
I think there's actually like partnerships to be had there with high level athletes. Because you look at Tom Brady was very famous for having like the TB12 sort of diet that he's tried to monetize, which was largely plant-based. Chris Paul is another one who I think is entirely plant-based as a basketball player. LeBron James talks about how he spends millions of dollars on his body every year and his plant-based foods. I feel like there is a lane and an opportunity there for Beyond to partner with if they're going down this road of like...
Hey, but listen, didn't they try to partner with Joey Chestnut?
Yeah, they did. And look where that got Joey Chestnut.
Is Joey Chestnut an example of an elite? In a way.
Well,
Yeah.
now everyone wants him to do a race with Usain. Has anyone seen this?
God,
the Joey
no.
Chestnut Usain Bolt. It's it's eat a hot dog and run 100 meters.
That rules.
And who would win, Usain Bolt or Joey Chestnut?
Probably Usain.
Without losing their lunch, or is that?
Yeah, think about how fast Joey Chestnut eats a hot dog. How fast do you think Usain Bolt can eat a hot dog?
Yeah, but how fast do you think Joey Chestnut runs?
Not very fast. He has done it. I think his time total was like 32 seconds. Which is not great, but he eats the hot dog in like
29 of those.
Probably less than that, running. Honestly, yeah.
And he takes the 100 meter in 29 seconds. He'd have to train up a little bit. Usain Bolt, let's say after eating a hot dog, he can run an 11-second 100 meter.
So he needs to take 20 seconds to eat that hot dog.
To eat a hot dog.
Damn. This is like making me feel kind of ill.
Yeah. Well, I will say one more thing about the sourcing is that I think it lets Beyond tell this story that is sort of like back to the earth and back to this connection of these actual plant products, right? Like Clint's story talks about how these beans come from a family farm in North Dakota. And I know that Beyond has made this connection too with the lentils and their sun sausages coming from specific farms. So when you talk about sourcing real plants, you can then tell a story that connects it to the earth and the people working that earth.
That's a really good way of putting it. All right, it's prediction time. I don't know who, Kristin or Clint, who wants to go first, but what is next for Beyond Meat and what should be next for Beyond Meat?
Well, I will say one thing they just came out with at the same time as this Beyond Ground is, like Clint was saying earlier, this Beyond Steak alternative that is actually like a chunk of steak that is in a couple steakhouses. I think they're called BOA steakhouses in a few locations across the country. And so that, I think, is this interesting example of them, again, trying to do both lanes, right, and trying to appeal to everyone.
Imagine not eating meat and deciding to go to a steakhouse. Like, that is just a crazy...
Sometimes you're dragged along.
Right, with your in-laws.
And we are back to the in-law dinner. You just got to get through it.
Sometimes you just have to be there. And the cliche is that the usual option is just French fries. So I will say anything other than a French fry is...
What a great endorsement for in-laws as a brand. Sometimes you just have to be there.
You just have to get through the dinner and be there. But that's an interesting product that just came out at the same time.
Clint, what about you? What do you think?
Ethan talked about some of them, and they're not ready to bring them out. They're not ready to roll them out yet, but they're not meat analogs. They are very much not. And I don't know where they are in that process. Some of these are things that he has himself, just like little pet projects that he has been working on. Like, I'll just order a bunch of this stuff and see what happens if I do this with it. But, think packaged goods that are like the center of the grocery store and that have few ingredients. a lot of protein, if that's what you're into, like this Beyond Ground has more protein than almost anything I've ever seen. Like these, like it's 27
You are like
grams.
a real salesman for Beyond
Well,
Ground.
I don't know that you need that.
27 grams,
I don't
that's
know
a
that you
lot.
need that much protein
27
either.
grams is a
And
lot.
that was one more thing about Ethan in the Gladiator thing. Like he's like eating almost exclusively a fava bean protein diet right now. And like I watched him he just took down several bowls of this stuff.
There is something interesting, though, that makes sense for Beyond, which is they focus so much on protein and creating these proteins and having high proteins. And protein itself is basically a food category now in a way that is not always synonymous with meat, like we were talking about before, the idea of protein chips and protein bars and whatever else. And so I think it does make sense for them to focus more on where can we put this protein in things that doesn't even resemble meat anymore.
We'll be back with Kristin and Clint for Keeping Tabs, but first, a quick break, followed by my interview with Fast Company's Harry McCracken and Jared Newman.
As affordable, reliable energy demand increases at historic rates, one company is uniquely positioned to accelerate America forward. Williams. We have 117 years of know-how in powering progress, and we're ready to power the next 100 years of innovation. Learn how our natural gas infrastructure is critical to the future of AI at williams.com.
1995 was one of the most important years in tech history. From the Netscape IPO to the launch of Amazon, this was the start of Silicon Valley we see today. It also happened to be the year Fast Company magazine debuted. Our tech team here at Fast Company put together a 1995 package looking back at that year, and I talked to contributing writer Jared Newman and global tech editor Harry McCracken all about it. Harry, Jared, welcome to the show. I believe it's your first time, both of you.
It is. Hey, Yaz.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So before we get to your articles and even the 1995 week project, where were you in 1995? Jared, I will start with you.
Let's see. I guess I was, 12 years old. So I was at my home in
Word.
Connecticut. Probably.
Watching a lot of I don't know what people watched then.
Well, for the sake of, I don't remember just watching on TV, but for the sake of, PC stuff, I was graduating from, DOS and figuring out how to play like Doom and X-Wing through the DOS prompt to probably still using DOS for that in Windows 95, but also having this whole new operating system to figure out.
Harry, what about you?
Well, unlike Jared, I was a grown-up in 1995. And in fact, I was a technology journalist, so not all that much has changed in the last 30 years. I worked at a magazine called PC World, which at the time was a big deal because one of the main ways people got their information about technology was by going to these monthly computer magazines. And there was an entire section on the newsstand of them, and they were very thick with information.
Mm-hmm. Where were you living? What culture were you consuming?
At the time, I lived in Boston, but I was coming out to San Francisco more and more often. And eventually, it kind of made sense to come out here full time.
I was getting a lot of video game demos through CDs that were packed into magazines. So that was pretty important at the time.
Those things were a huge deal. Those really helped with newsstand sales if we could mount a CD-ROM on the front of the magazine.
To start off, Harry, I'll start with you. What was the thought process behind this project? What drew you to revisit 1995 as a year, beyond the fact that it's the 30th anniversary?
Well, full disclosure, last year we did 1994 week.
Right, okay.
And that was a lot of fun and turned out well. And so it was a natural thing to consider doing it again this year. We did look at whether it should be 1985 week or 2005 week, which might have worked. But as we looked at what happened in 1995, we realized it was a pretty interesting year, and there were a bunch of strong candidates for stories we could do, and we could put up a strong lineup, even though something I had forgotten is that 10 years ago, we also did a 1995 week. And
that's so funny.
Fortunately, it turned out the stories we did then were an entirely different lineup of interesting topics than the ones we did this time around.
What were some of the kind of strong candidates that you were most excited about? Were they the two that you both ended up writing?
Well, we knew right away that Windows 95 was kind of a slam dunk. Its very name tells you it was one of the big stories in 1995, and certainly one of the things people remember. The ThinkPad I wrote about was not as obvious. I actually had to do a little research. I started to search around to remind myself of the hardware that came out in that year.
I remembered 95. I really did not remember the ThinkPad. You know, like that was foreign to me.
Yeah, at the time it was big news. It was certainly one of the most prominent products then, but I'd forgotten exactly what year it came out. But the moment I saw it was 1995, I was like, oh, okay, this is my chance to write about this fascinating product.
Yeah, and in fairness, I was 2 and we lived in Haiti, so really very far from technology. Jared, I want to start with you. Tell me how you thought about writing about Windows 95. I feel like I hear about Windows 98 all the time. It's like the classic, interface.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you first my other idea that got left on the cutting room floor, which I still want to work on coming back to. So this is kind of part of the narrative for me. So there was this program for Windows back in the day called Click and Play, and it would allow you to kind of create video games with like a graphical kind of logical interface. You have to know how to program it all. And so I was kind of into that. And then I got onto AOL and found people that were doing that. And then around this time, that was when they kind of opened up AOL and let you like use the entire internet. And so there was this whole like coming online to the entire internet and finding like message boards and things like that. And so that for me was like kind of part of, it's like a formative like computing experience for me. It was kind of like moving through this whole thing. I still think that is worth doing.
You are a very smart kid.
I still think it's worth doing. But I mean, part of that is just kind of also moving beyond, like I said, the DOS kind of interface and having this whole like graphical thing to interact with. And if you used a program like Click and Play, it was like Windows, and it was just part of, managing files in File Explorer and all that stuff. That was, there might have been a Windows 3.1 version at some point, which I can't remember. But I mean, Windows 95 is really when that kind of stuff solidified.
Yeah.
So to get back to your actual question, we were looking at things that were just kind of like still beloved today.
Mm-hmm.
You look at things like even just the color scheme of Windows 95, like those like medium blues and
So
like solid
reassuring.
grays and teals and everything. And, these little icons for things like File Explorer and concepts like the Start menu. And like, people are really like into that stuff. Looking back now, I mean, I don't think at the time people were thinking of Windows 95 as this being like design leadership. But you look back now and it's really beloved. And what I was trying to get at was like how much of this is just kind of cheap retro nostalgia.
Yeah.
And how much of it was like there's something else there. There's some reason that people still kind of gravitate towards Windows 95 beyond that.
You kind of came down on the fact that it's like a very, it was like a really pure time. And there was also not, like, people were not thinking about stuff like dark patterns, right?
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, I think that, part of this is like the internet was still very new as a whole. So that's kind of an element of it. But also, I mean, just, a lot of these computer concepts were just still being invented. And so there wasn't really space for that kind of stuff. And I mean, just a lot of the concepts of computer things you would do on a computer were a lot simpler. So that's part of it as well.
Now, I'll come back to Windows 95 in a second, but Harry, why the IBM ThinkPad? Why was it such a sort of revolutionary device?
Well, it's one of the very few products in tech history where it's really true that there was never anything like it before, and also nothing like it since.
I mean, you could say that about, like, I don't know, I'm trying to think of like a failure, a tech failure, right?
Well, there are some bad products for which that's the case.
Yeah, exactly. It's like good.
This was a great product, which sold well. And yet, for a number of reasons, which I get to in the story, there was never a follow-up. And by the time other companies could have imitated it, its time had passed. I also found it interesting just because it's all about mechanical engineering. Most products today have very few moving parts. This was a laptop whose keyboard expanded when you opened the case.
The butterfly design, never forget.
The butterfly keyboard. So it had this nice full-sized keyboard in a case that was smaller than a full-sized keyboard, which was a remarkable achievement at the time. And unfortunately, the guy who designed it passed away some years ago, but I tracked down his brother as one of the people I talked to and learned a bit about how remarkably clever this guy was and how he came up with this thing that is still kind of astounding. I think to this day, if you see the ThinkPad 701 in person, it will blow your mind a little bit.
Laptops were themselves as a whole a pretty small market at the time, right? Because like I'm thinking about my Windows 95 use, and pretty much everybody I knew was on a desktop.
Laptops at the time had been around since early 1980s, but the industry was still in the process of figuring out how to build good ones that would run Windows well and might be satisfying as your primary computer. At the time, people praised the ThinkPad 701 for being thin and lightweight. Well, it was about as thick as 4 MacBook Airs, and it weighed 4.5 pounds, which nobody would describe as lightweight today. But at the time, it was thinner and lighter than most of the competition.
Even computers 10 years ago feel so heavy to me. I remember our IT department once tried to give me one from 2012, and I was like, I'm sorry. I know I'm low ranking in this office, but that's crazy.
A lot of the progress has happened just in the last few years in terms of figuring out how to make them thin, and stuff like USB-C has helped, and solid-state drives rather than hard disks.
Jared, I want to come back. Actually, first of all, Jared, did you have a personal computer age 12?
It was a family computer.
That makes more. I was like, damn.
I do have a core memory of like being on the computer. It was we had like an office room that the computer was in, and I have like
the computer room.
Like,
people had computer rooms.
Computer room, which is an amazing concept in itself. Maybe that's for 1996 we can revisit the computer room idea. But anyway, I had this like core memory of like my dad coming into the computer room and me having been on there like all day and all previous day, and him being like, "You're spending every waking hour of the day on the computer." So I was hogging the family computer.
And you're like, "Yeah, we have dial-up internet. I have to wait half an hour for anything to load, Dad."
We did at some point get the second line that allowed you to use dial-up internet without interfering or without being thrown off when somebody picked up the phone to call somebody. I don't remember if that was in 1995 or later.
That's a big deal.
Oh yeah, that was fancy.
Now, I want to talk about, the appeal of Windows 95 today. As AI gets into everything, as the internet has become this sort of like dark place, why do you think the design became so iconic? Like the sort of minimalist approach to the design. What do you think people miss about it most?
One thing that struck me is like you can actually download like a self-contained Windows 95 app, and it runs on Windows or Mac or Linux.
Really?
Yeah. It's free. You can just run Windows 95 and play solitaire. It's amazing.
Oh, Spider Solitaire. Remember that? They just had spiders on the back of the cards.
I think they had Free Cell and Klondike. Anyway, the thing is like how immediate it is. Like there's a version of Word on there, and you click on it and open it up, and it opens faster than Word does now.
Yeah.
Which is kind of mind-boggling. And like the start menu, you click and it's immediate. Like everything is just straightforward, and a lot of that was intentionally designed that way. Microsoft brought in designers to lead the design of Windows 95, which is something they hadn't done for earlier versions. They were kind of facing a lot of pressure from Apple to kind of step up their own design. They did a lot of user feedback, usability testing, constantly tweaking, stuff that everybody takes for granted now, but was new then. And it was all in service of making Windows 95 super easy to use if you'd never used a computer before.
And it was, back in the day, so much easier to use than Apple's interface. I remember.
I remember like looking back to magazine articles at the time, and even like the Mac people were kind of like, Microsoft may have caught up a little bit here, like kind of begrudgingly admitting that, some of the design stuff was on point. And, to your point, like it's all of that was kind of in service of like making it easier and more user-friendly, whereas now some of that usability testing maybe goes into like getting people to perform a certain business action. And that wasn't necessarily on the radar so much then.
As part of my research for my story, I bought a ThinkPad 701 that came with Windows 95.
Off eBay.
Yes.
How much did you pay? How much did you expense our company for this? I want to know.
I'm still trying to decide whether I can get away with expensing it. I may put it back on eBay and expense the difference between what I paid and what I get back.
How much was it?
I paid a pretty penny.
Doesn't want to admit it on air.
You should do what you mentioned in the article, which is people modding it to run on modern PC hardware. I think
I've considered stuff like that. But it came with Windows 95, and I have to say I was pleasantly surprised by what a nice experience Windows 95 was. I don't think I'd used it since the 1990s. I found it more pleasant today than I did at the time, just because it was very minimalist and to the point and uncomplicated.
What were the things that you can't do now that you could do then?
Well, I mainly just wanted to see the keyboard in action to refresh my memory about the experience. And that actually was quite helpful because it kind of sounds like a Rube Goldberg machine, and it would be weird and clunky, but it works remarkably smoothly, and it even makes a satisfying noise. So whether or not Fast Company pays me back for this expensive computer I bought, the experience of actually using it and seeing the keyboard in action again helped me write a better story.
There's companies that sell, right, like those like typewriter throwback devices where it's just like a nice keyboard and a minimalist screen that you write stuff on. And I feel like you could use that for that if you could figure out a way to get the data off of it.
The big issue is I have to press the power button about 40 times before it actually boots up.
Okay, fair enough.
Which probably would not be great for my productivity or its resale value on eBay.
You just need to hold it down forever. Remember, that was the thing you had to do for a long time. When I think about the expanding keyboard, I think about we've reported on this. For example, Samsung has tried, and I think now they've done the phones that sort of have a wider screen because they unfold, and you hear about so many you have one. There you go. No, but they had a lot of trouble doing it. They were releasing phones that weren't working for a while. And I suppose when I read about the ThinkPad, I was like, no way this shit works that well. You know what I mean? How much of a tech innovation was it?
I mean, it worked remarkably well, given especially that it was the first version they did. Although Tim Beheron, who is a veteran tech analyst and who writes for Fast Company, got to see it at some meetings at IBM before it was even released. So I interviewed him, and he told me there were some issues with users not really completely folding it and then tossing it into a backpack and having reliability problems because of that. So it did introduce some more complexity.
Classic. Blame the user.
Yeah, right. If they had continued with further designs, they might have figured out ways to make it a little bit more robust. But overall, I was very impressed with how well it worked.
Why do you think the idea of the folding keyboard totally disappeared? Is it just because screens got better?
Yeah, well, there's a super straightforward explanation, which is that the laptop screens got bigger. Most importantly, they got wider. So you could have a screen that was as wide as a full-sized keyboard. And that actually happened later in 1995. So the ThinkPad 701 was announced in March of that year. And in November of the same year, IBM decided to discontinue it. And it was just kind of a very cold, objective decision based on the fact that they could take a wider screen that was a much better fit for a wide keyboard. And the next year, they came out with a laptop that did not have an expanding keyboard, but in every other way, it was much better. It was thinner and lighter and had a larger screen. And the expanding keyboard would have been a novelty, but it wouldn't really have offered any practical value at that point. And the computer was delayed a little bit. It was such a hard engineering project that it was originally supposed to ship in 1994, and it was delayed into 1995. So the window where this was of value just turned out to be just a few months. If they had figured it out early in the 90s, it might have been around for much longer.
Jared, as you were writing this article and as you were looking at the Windows 9095 design, did you figure out how Microsoft kind of fumbled the bag so bad on some of this later on?
In terms of just the design of the operating system and stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, 98 is kind of iconic, so they, had dominance for a long time. But at what point were people like, why is Apple's interface more appealing? How do you think about that?
Yeah. I don't know. Harry, you may have more ideas about this than me. I think some of it is Microsoft as a whole kind of got away from being a really consumer-centric company. 1995 was peak consumer Microsoft in terms of people lining up to get a copy of Windows 95 and install it in their computers. And, you know, they maybe tried a little bit with stuff like Xbox and Zune, and none of that really expanded in the way Apple really kind of became the cool consumer company. And I don't know why they so much lost sight on the design element of it and why kind of Apple, maybe they're just better at it. I don't know. Harry, maybe you have more ideas than I do on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think in a lot of ways, the zenith of Windows design was Windows XP, which came out in 2001.
I remember getting that.
It was essentially a somewhat improved but vastly more reliable version of Windows 95 or Windows 98, and people just loved it. But it kind of felt after that, like Microsoft had run out of ideas to make it better. And a few years later, they came out with Windows Vista, which is famous for being one of the least popular versions of Windows. And
Yeah, Vista was bad.
it had a big focus on being prettier and having transparency and stuff, and people didn't really want that. And then a few years after that, they came out with Windows 8, which was a reaction to the iPad and had a big focus on touchscreen stuff. And it also turned out that people who love Windows didn't necessarily want it to behave like an iPad. And in the years since that came out, a lot of what's been new about Windows has been backpedaling back to something that looks a little bit more like the operating system did before the iPad came out. And so I think even today, people kind of like something that's simple and straightforward, and it doesn't necessarily need to be gorgeous or in tune with the latest trends.
You talk to people at Microsoft and then people who kind of observe Microsoft, and they say like Windows 11 is the operating system where certainly not perfect by any means, but like they seem to have made a conscious effort to like throw back to some of the Windows 95 simplicity. They stripped down some of the start menu and taskbar stuff, which not everybody loves, but you know, there's clearly an effort there to be like, hey, this has kind of gotten out of hand and maybe we need to go back to basics a little bit.
Yeah. So one of the stated goals of this series was basically that understanding the tech of 1995 can help us kind of prepare for what's ahead and also, you know, say something about the tech industry as a whole. And I know that this is a very broad question, so take it as you want. But Harry, I'll start with you. How do you think this series kind of delivered on that? What are the biggest takeaways from that year, and what do they say about where we are now?
Well, we definitely didn't want it just to be a nostalgia fest. We wanted to have some lessons. We wanted to connect the dots to the present day. And when you're looking back 30 years, you can do that. And there are things that are completely obvious that weren't obvious in 1995, such as the fact that the expanding keyboard would have such a small period of relevance. And in the case of Windows 95, there was just like an enormous amount of hoopla around it. It was a brilliant marketing success. And in the fullness of time, that matters less than some of the decisions that Microsoft got right, just in terms of functionality. I think it's useful to keep in mind that right now we're going through maybe the biggest period of change with AI. And I mean, almost everybody in the industry is making these grandiose proclamations about where it's headed. And it's helpful just to remind ourselves that nobody really knows where it's going. And 30 years from now, there'll be things about 2025 that are completely obvious that none of us can quite grasp. And maybe Fast Company or somebody else will do a 2025 week.
You know, you look back to concepts like the start menu, the taskbar, and file explorer. Those things were kind of created in Windows 95, and they are enduring today. And I know people at Microsoft have a sense of like, with AI, that maybe they're going to be able to invent some new paradigms that maybe we'll look back as the standard 30 years from now. But also, you know, we're a little bit more wary of that now than we were 30 years ago. You know, we were excited for these new concepts to some extent then, and now I think we're a little more cynical or a little more skeptical about companies wanting to reinvent the way we interact with computers, especially because, as we've just touched on a bunch of times, like they're not always necessarily having the user's best interests at heart anymore.
Microsoft, amazingly enough, is riffing on some of the same ideas it was in 1995. In 1995, it came out with this interface called Microsoft Bob that had these talking animals helping you with your computer. And that led to Clippy, which people remember much better.
R.I.P.
And just this month, Microsoft announced that it's giving Copilot, this animated character, as the persona. And it's really essentially exactly the same idea as Microsoft Bob or Clippy, except with way better technology.
What's it going to look like? Do we know yet?
The initial version is sort of like a friendly little blob who looks a little bit like a cloud, but apparently they are going to do Clippy and other characters as well, and you may get to pick your character at some point.
The sort of anthropomorphizing of shapes is always funny to me. I just completed our company sexual harassment training where every character in dialogue and making offensive comments is just a different shape. And I want to know who started that because it's hilarious.
Yeah, I'm concerned that we're switching HR platforms and we may no longer get to see the little geometric shapes working in Office together.
No more harassing shapes?
No more triangles and squares.
Harry, or actually Jared, you can participate in this too. What do you think is the IBM ThinkPad of our time? Like if you think of the past 5 years, what's something that was like great or really interesting but ended up being kind of a flash in the pan? I'm trying to think too.
That whole category of like always listening assistants, which a lot of companies have tried to push.
Yeah, although none of it worked. Like IBM thing worked.
Right. There wasn't even really a redeeming like hardware advancement to go along with that.
Yeah.
So now I have to think about that some more.
I mean, I think the Humane Pin and the Rabbit were actually not great products.
Oh, I forgot about the Rabbit.
Which makes them different than the ThinkPad. But the thing they have in common is that I think, with the Rabbit and the Humane Pin, there's this idea that this is kind of a separate category of AI wearables. And I think there's a decent chance it's not going to be a separate category. It's, your smartwatch or your smart eyeglasses or even just your phone may incorporate those features in the same way that expanding keyboard laptops turned out not to be a category. It's just that all laptops got better keyboards.
Well, I think this is a great place to end it. Thank you both for coming on the show and talking us through your pieces. And for our listeners, please read the whole series online at fastcompany.com. And subscribe to Harry's newsletter. Harry, do you want to give yourself a plug?
Sure. It's called Plugged In, and it comes out on Fridays. And search for Fast Company Plugged In, and you'll find it very easily.
All right. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thanks, Yaz.
Okay, we are back with Kristin and Clint, and it's time to wrap up the show with Keeping Tabs. This is where each of us shares a story, trend, or piece of pop culture we're following right now. And Kristin, Clint, since you're our guest, Clint, let's start with you. What are you keeping tabs on?
You'll never believe that I would bring this topic up, but mine is Starbucks related.
And I love that every time we talk about Starbucks with you, you're like, I don't drink it, but...
Yeah. It has cultural clout. So I don't know how to orient this, but besides to say that like Starbucks is doing super well right now. It has this new arch rival in China called Luckin Coffee, and Luckin is China's largest coffee chain, and it just opened its first U.S. location.
Didn't they like manipulate their stock or like commit fraud a while ago?
Oh yeah, they did a little light financial fraud and like $300 million worth. They were on NASDAQ and they got delisted and declared bankruptcy. It was like a big deal.
Well, didn't stop them.
At risk of going too in depth into like how much glee I take in Luckin and Starbucks fighting over like this race to create the most impersonal mobile order pickup depot on the planet. So the Luckin just moved into the U.S. for the first time, like physically, as like for his first cafe, right? Like it was on NASDAQ and that didn't go so well, but it picked Lower Manhattan, Broadway near Astor Place. For people unfamiliar with Manhattan, Astor Place is like, famous plaza. Seen a lot of change.
No more Kmart.
Years. One of the most iconic features. Yeah. No more Kmart. And no more Starbucks.
Wegmans.
Yeah. Like it
There's
used to for decades. Yeah, the Wegmans took over Kmart. But one of the most iconic parts of the for better or worse, of Astor Place for decades was this Starbucks. It had like these big sweeping views of the plaza. It was one of the oldest, one of the busiest, and at one point was the largest Starbucks in New York City. It closed last year. Starbucks claimed that the rent got too high, and today the space just sits empty. But Luckin opened its first store a block away on Broadway. And
that's a flex.
Yeah. And since it opened, it's been just getting a ton of press. Like Wall Street Journal sent its China economy beat reporter, not some local New York person, like their person who covers the Chinese economy, went to Broadway, stood on the street, interviewed people in this piece that they ended up calling "Meet the Chinese Coffee Chain That Won't Leave Starbucks Alone." And
you know, when you really want to like do something and you say to your editor, you're like, you actually have to fly me to New York from Beijing. You know what I mean?
Or wasn't there a New York Times piece about the Maine lobster roll over the weekend? That was
Someone
just
was like, I just want to eat a lobster roll.
I saw that.
They just sent someone to Maine to do an investigative piece on Maine lobster rolls.
Guess I better report on the Hamptons.
To be fair, we kind of did that last summer.
That was a really good, and we had a great time.
We did have a great time. It was awesome.
The great irony here is that Luckin is the absolute opposite of what Starbucks was founded to be. It's a kind of place that would have given 1990s Howard Schultz like a brain aneurysm. It's like dozens of gimmicky drink flavors, app-only ordering, like absolutely no third place vibe, hardly any seating at all. Sort of what Starbucks has morphed into in recent years.
But isn't Starbucks doing away with its mobile-only stores per the latest earnings?
Yeah, under Brian Niccol now that he's trying to return them to the third place era.
Sharpies and seats. That's their whole, strategy.
Do you remember when Starbucks tried to put olive oil in their coffee?
Oh yeah. Nope, not
protein.
for me.
They're trying to put protein in their coffee now.
Yeah.
It's beyond ground.
So the end part of this though is that Starbucks has now decided to strike back against this first location of Luckin, and across the intersection it's like on the corner of Broadway and whatever street. Yeah. I don't know what number that is. Probably 8 or 9 or something. Across the intersection is an empty storefront, and Starbucks didn't rent that storefront, but rather it took over the window space to hang ads facing the Luckin.
Do the ads say like "fuck you, Luckin," or is it more subtle?
No, the ads are stupid. The ads are just the ads are just an iced coffee next to the words like "Hello Summer" and Starbucks name. Like that's all it is. It's just it's so
stock is up 7%.
That's so good.
They took, I guess, those like video ads that are above the subway entrance, like, so they took over that too, and that's on the opposite side. So now they have on one window, and the windows in the store, there's like the paper, like whatever banner paper ads hanging, and then on the other direction there's video ads hanging. So if you're leaving Luckin, you will 100% see a Starbucks ad no matter which direction you face.
That kind of rules.
And then Starbucks will make it.
Wait, Starbucks you didn't have enough money for the rent at Astor Place, but they had enough money for all these ads.
Yeah, who knows? And they're like, one of the reasons that they've reported declining sales for the past 6 quarters is their failure in China. Like they went all in on China. They failed hard, and there's other problems going on with the company as well. But the reason that they're not doing well in China is partly because Luckin is doing exceptionally well in China right now. So the fact that they're getting beaten in China by this upstart chain whose drinks like kind of out Frappuccino, the Frappuccino, because like they do get kind of weird, and it's like juices mixed with coffee and all kinds of other stuff. But now this chain's followed Starbucks back to the United States and might start eroding their market share on its own turf, and plants its flag just like a block away from one of the biggest failures that the Starbucks has had in New York City. Oh, one last thing that I have to mention.
This is the longest keeping tabs that we've ever had.
This is great.
I know. I'm all for it.
Sorry, it's just too much of my own reporting in this stuff over the years. Having done features on Starbucks and then one on Starbucks China, it's just too much in my wheelhouse, I guess. The Luckin Cafe has this. They're using a numbering system for, I guess, all of their U.S. locations, and on the front side of like the pickup counter is not just the digit 1 for store number 1, but the digit 1 preceded by 4 zeros, meaning that Luckin like has the capacity for 999,999 stores under that numbering system. And so it's just like, like no way are they making that many of them. But it just adds an extra amount of a middle finger to this whole thing. That like, we could have, 5 digits worth of stores that we open.
I know you're a coffee snob. Have you tried the Luckin coffee yet?
No.
We're going to have you call into Keeping Tabs after you've tried it and just give us a small, like...
No, come into the office. We'll get a taste test of shitty coffee.
We should do a
Clint.
taste test.
That would be really funny, actually.
I think if Starbucks really wants to win, they need to get Sydney Sweeney to do an ad talking about the importance of single-source genetic origin of their beans.
Well, did you see, like, Trump yesterday was like, I love Sydney Sweeney?
Yeah. And then like threw some haymakers at Jaguar that Taylor Swift ended up there somehow.
Anyway, Kristin, what are you keeping tabs on?
Well, mine is way more straightforward and simple. I'll say that I've been anticipating the new David Byrne album. It comes out in September. If anybody, he has a single out called Everybody Laughs that is just very good vibes and a great music video. So he has a new album out in September. I'm excitedly waiting for that.
Did any of you go see American Utopia when it was?
I wish I didn't get to.
Yeah, me neither. It was really hard to get a ticket.
Well, I saw it. And it was great.
Good for you.
You know what? I have to say, I saw it. I loved it. And then, he did that performance at the Oscars for Everything Everywhere All at Once. And I was like, this song should not have been nominated. I was like, what the fuck are they doing on stage?
They can't all be winners.
Josh, what are you keeping tabs on?
So another podcast company gone into the trash pile. Amazon shuttered Wondery.
This sucks.
So sad.
Yeah, 110 people laid off. That's really sad. That's a bummer. But this feels like the final nail in the coffin of the big tech's bet on franchisable IP from podcast companies, and
there's still hope for us. Yeah. Just kidding.
Well, I mean, I think it's really like these narrative podcasts. I mean, Wondery had sort of shifted strategies in recent years. They acquired the New Heights podcast. That's the Kelsey brothers. They have the Dax Shepard show. They have some other like lower lift creator driven stuff, and those are still going to remain underneath the brand under a new creator services. And then their more narrative projects are going to live under Audible. So it's still continuing, but like Gimlet, Pineapple Street, Wondery, these brands made big bets on high production value narrative podcasts. I mean, Dirty John, Dr. Death are some of the big properties out of Wondery that were turned into Netflix and Amazon shows, I believe. It's just not turning a profit, which is understandable because there's not a lot of margin in TV production anyways. So why is franchisable IP the way to go?
Well, that also makes me think of, I don't know if anyone has listened to the new Amy Poehler podcast, which is already getting so much hype. She is constantly like making these sort of jokes at herself about how she's just now getting into podcasts. When,
that's like every ad.
And she's like, I'm so late on it. But I think the success of that show points to something I've noticed, which is like celebrities are just in everything now. Like every commercial for like mobile games has a celebrity in it. And I keep thinking like, where are the sort of like up-and-coming actors who can get their start in commercials because every single commercial is a celebrity
Wayfair literally has all of them. Every single one of the celebrities.
And it's like you need that sort of big name attached to something and there's like no hope for anyone else. And I see that sort of happening in podcasts too, where it's like it's just big names who can be like a big name who interviews somebody.
Yeah, I mean, those are who are getting the big deals. But I will say, I mean, I constantly look at the success of The Ringer as surviving the sort of Spotify podcast apocalypse a few years ago and thriving because they've successfully tied The Ringer as a brand with the brand of the hosts that are running. Obviously, Bill Simmons is very front and center. I'll include Crooked in this as well. They haven't been acquired, but like Crooked as a brand is synonymous with the PodSave Bros. The Ringer is synonymous with Bill Simmons, and by proxy, the individuals who are hosting shows beyond that. So they've successfully done that. Gimlet and Pineapple and Wondery now, those brands never really, like, no one associated the Kelsey brothers with Wondery or Dax Shepard with Wondery. It was a Wondery podcast, but those were separate. So what value does the Wondery name have for Amazon, who can just fold these under Amazon or Audible, which have some brand equity? I think that's part of it. And then a lot of this is also a shift to more video podcasts, which I think I'm of two minds of. I think it's less about video as a medium and more so about YouTube as a platform where people consume stuff. There was some recent survey data out from Edison Research, and then the New York Times had a report on this, where about a third of podcast consumed hours, or more closer to 40%, is on YouTube. But not all of those people are watching it on YouTube. They're playing it on YouTube and they're minimizing it, or it's on in the background and they're zoning in and out. So I think the next mistake podcast companies are going to make is overproducing video podcasts and making them like late night or talk shows and being these big high production value things. And then they're going to blow all their money on that when people just want the people that they like on a microphone in not even in 4K if they have it, and it doesn't really matter the production value. So I can see the next money pit coming in podcasts, and it's going to be trying to make a late night talk show podcast, and it's just going to waste a ton of money.
Well, video production also lets people make like TikTok clips and Instagram reel clips.
That is a huge part of it too.
Podcast too.
Oh,
Yeah.
do we know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
I also don't know how true this is, but I heard about brands or like people who want to be sort of promote themselves as a brand, just like faking video podcast interviews for TikTok. Like they'll just set up a microphone and then like it was never a real podcast, but they just fake it so they could like get the clip.
I think that's actually the case with the Maryland Foodie Boys, those kids who have the podcast about food. I don't think they actually release anything but vertical video.
I don't think so. Yeah.
Of them talking on videos.
Clips.
And I'm kind of like, honestly, it's not a bad strategy at all. I mean, that's getting into, that's a few degrees removed from the AI slop, but I think that's going to be another thing is just AI generated podcast vertical videos that people make with their own avatars and stuff like that. It's not even going to be, there's not even going to be anything
no real people anymore.
Oh my God. Well, Yaz, let's get something maybe a little, I don't know. Maybe you have a depressing thing. Maybe you have a fun thing. What are you keeping tabs on?
So don't ask me how I got here because I don't really know. But I was recently looking at the list of honorary Harlem Globetrotters. And there's only like 9 of them. And it's the randomest list of people I've ever seen in my life. So I wanted to read them out to you. And just get your reactions. There's one person on this list, I don't even know who they are. Okay, so let's start. Robin Roberts, the Good Morning America presenter. Sure. By the way, this list represents people who have extraordinary character and achievement and have made an everlasting mark on the world. That's criteria. So Robin Roberts, Pope Francis, Jesse Jackson.
Okay.
Pope John Paul II.
The Popes is a weird thing. Is there a Harlem Globetrotter Catholic Church connection?
I
mean, like, I guess Jesse Jackson is like a New York, or was he a New York person?
I think so, yeah. It's about to get randomer. So this is the one I don't know, Jackie Joyner Kersey.
Oh, yeah. Jackie Joyner Kersey is an Olympian.
Okay, well, he's also an honorary member of the Harlem Globetrotters.
Yeah. I believe it's a woman.
Oh, she. Okay, well,
yeah, I think it's a woman as well.
What was her sport?
I'm looking that up now. Track and field.
She ran.
Okay, well, random. Nelson Mandela.
That's hysterical.
Yeah, Nelson Mandela, Whoopi Goldberg.
Okay.
Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who is a basketball player.
Okay, that makes sense, yeah.
Bob Hope. And finally, wait for it, Henry Kissinger.
Okay, but what does it take to become an honorary? Like, if you get an honorary degree from a school, you show up at the graduation. But to get an honorary, to become an honorary Harlem Globetrotter, do you have to like make a dunk? What do you do?
What do you think links all these people? Do you think they can all make dunks, Kristen?
Henry Kissinger is the funniest possible.
Well, it's also just funny because there's only 9 people. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not like I picked a bunch of random names. It's like, those are the
It's not like they've been doing this for 40
Yeah.
years and have just run out of people at this point. They need to put somebody.
Oh my God.
Anyway,
Mike Lindell from the My Pillow creator is the next honoree.
Yeah, well, so you're welcome for that. And I think that's a really great place to end it. Maybe Ethan Brown is next. Our show is produced by Avery Miles and Blake Odom with help from Sam Gebauer and Hawa Atori. Editing by Matt Toder, mix and sound design by Nicholas Torres, and our executive producer is honorary Harlem Globetrotter, Josh Christensen. Remember again to subscribe, rate, and review, and we will see you next week.